up? I'm Vocab, and I'm with my friend David, and we're just gonna shoot a couple of videos of us talking about the thesis of David's book, Nailed. Yes.
And I'm Dave Fitzgerald, as he said. I'm the author of a book called Nailed, 10 Christian Myths That Show Jesus Never Existed at All. And as crazy as that sounds, and I get that sounds crazy, that's no hyperbole. I really think there wasn't even a guy named Jesus. And I just want to say, if you had come up to me and said, what I've been telling to people lately 15 years ago, I would say, oh, that's crazy nonsense, you know. It never even entered my mind that there might have not been a Jesus until I got curious to know what we could really know about what he really said and really did, and what was just legendary additions, add-ons that came later. And, you know, long story short, I got to the point where I'm thinking, well, that just doesn't add up. That just doesn't add up. That just doesn't add up. And now I am one of those guys called a mythicist who thinks that the whole Jesus story that we see in Mark was an allegory and a response to the Roman invasion of Jerusalem. And I don't think it was a conspiracy. I don't think it was they were setting out to like do a Joseph Smith number and create a fake religion. I think it was a religious movement where they were looking in Hebrew scriptures for words from the Messiah, and their Jesus was speaking to them from scripture. So that's where I am.
So, like, when you first got into it, who were the people you looked at? Because I know, for example, Richard Carrier said you read Earl Doherty.
Yeah.
Who did you read that helped turn your...
Yeah, Earl Doherty was one of my first ones, too, because there's a lot of really crappy books about Jesus myth theory. Like Joseph Atwell, he's the latest one who's got this crazy idea that the Romans invented Jesus. It's just, if you're smart enough to come up with this crazy theory you'd be smart enough to know it just doesn't work at all. And there's that movie Zeitgeist that came out, and it's just bad. It's operating off outdated scholarships, you know, from the 1900s that have been debunked completely, and it just makes our job harder, you know, trying to put out what the best arguments are.
So who else did you read?
But Earl, I was going to say, yeah, Earl Doherty was one, Robert Price was another. There are a lot of Christians I read. Bruce Metzger is probably my favorite one.
But does Bruce Metzger have sort of standard works on historical
absolutely.
Jesus? What,
yeah. He's an evangelical. He's an evangelical Christian who's done a great job of giving us how the canon came to be.
Yeah, see, he deals more with canonical issues and textual issues.
Right.
He's not necessarily, it's not that he's ignorant, but his specialty is not historical Jesus studies.
Not per se. I mean, he just takes it as a given.
He doesn't have any sort of standardized work. So, so you're saying
But on the other hand, his protege Bart Ehrman is really interested in the historical Jesus question, and he takes it as a fact that it's ridiculous to question the fact that it could have been a Jesus.
So
couldn't have been a
who
Jesus,
are the sort of, they don't have to be evangelicals, because like John P. Meyer, who's a moderate Catholic, wrote.
And there's Jewish biblical historians. There's a whole spectrum of people who argue for a historical Jesus, but the thing.
Well, it's almost everybody.
It's almost everybody.
So that's why it's a whole spectrum.
But there is an important division you need to know, and that's especially Christian biblical historians. Their Jesus is not the same as the one that we get from secular biblical historians, and in fact, we don't get just one secular, Jesus of history versus the Jesus of faith. We get all these different hypothetical ones.
Well, you could say the same thing, even though it's a smaller field. You have the same thing with the Christ myth theory. You have some people who have Jesus.
Absolutely.
He was a guy who really existed, but then,
others think that he was a real guy, but it was a lot of mythical.
Yeah, or you have like he was just Paul invented him.
Right.
Other people have the Gospels invented him. Others none of them invented them, and it was later Christians who invented him. You have, it's this plethora of all these different possibilities and these different theories. That's part of the problem, is that we don't have any way in historical Jesus studies to pin down and say, well, okay, that's true and that's not true. We haven't been able to verify a single fact about Jesus' life that's not contradicted in some other way. Well,
and all these Jesus. These hypothetical Jesuses we get from secular Jesus scholars, none of them are implausible. They all got good, solid historical analogies, that match them, and they all sound reasonable until you read the next one. And as I'm going to argue in my next book, Jesus could have been a Galilean shaman. He could have been a zealot. He could have been, any number of these very plausible sounding things, but he couldn't probably have been all of them at the same time. And that's one of the things that first started clicking with me in the beginning, is that we really don't have a consensus on who this Jesus was.
Do you think that there's another historical figure whose deeds, words, sayings, all of that has been more studied by a more variety of people than Jesus?
Well, you've got people like Homer and Alexander the Great.
So like
all the major religious leaders like Siddhartha, the Buddha.
But so do you think there's an equal amount of what you might call Homerian scholarship as you do Jesus?
There might be that for Muhammad. Might be, but I mean, Christianity is just a bigger religion.
Well,
a bigger conglomeration of religions.
With Muhammad, if you're a faithful Muslim, say at the big university in Egypt, what happens if you say Muhammad said this in Surah 5, but I don't think he actually said it? What would happen? So it's not equal, because that doesn't happen in Christian universities. Nobody has a death threat.
Well, you don't get death threats, but your career death threats, that happens quite a bit, and that's something I want to document in my next book.
Yeah,
is how little respect Christ myth theory gets in religious institutions.
Well, Christ myth theory, see, that's because people view it essentially as a conspiracy theory, that the general consensus is that if you think that, you don't know how to do history.
Right.
It's not that we're so scared of it. That's why real historians don't spend time on it.
Well, see, here's the thing. That's not what I think happened. I think it is because they're scared.
Okay, now, and David, how do you know that's a motivation?
I'll give you an example. Well, first of all, look at the bias. I mean, it's not reasonable to expect that a Christian is going to...
Let's talk about some seminaries. Yeah. Union Theological Seminary. Let's talk about Princeton, Harvard, Yale. I mean, are these bastions of conservative thought? I mean, these are places that if you read the scholarship, like in Elaine Pagel's, this is not conservative work. You look at some of the big names, Marcus Borg, John Dominic Crossan, even some of the new guys, James Charlesworth, even, Dale Allison. These aren't like people who are, telling the sort of conservative evangelical story. They all have... Those are the biggest...
And that's not what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that if you come from a Christian context, like if you're a current Christian, that's just a non-starter. I mean, evolution is less scary to a Christian than Jesus myth. Because you can shape your Christianity to embrace evolution. You can't do that with Christ myth.
Yeah, but I don't think Christ myth theory is scary at all. I mean, how have I shown... Who's scared of it? Like, who really is scared of it? Because...
When you look at the way that historians and scholars who have tried to put forth Christ myth things, and you see how instantly their career suffers.
Who?
Thomas Verena is one. I'm sorry, Thomas Thompson is one.
Who is that? Where did he teach? What year?
Oh, come on. Yeah.
No, I never heard of him,
This was in the 70s. He was in American... the theological universities, and now he's in Copenhagen because he basically got run out of America for that. But he's still.
But he was a New Testament scholar.
Yes, he still is.
But you don't know the school or anything. But what's his book?
I want to say Talbot, but don't quote me on that because off the top of my head I don't know.
I mean, what I'm saying is I'm not trying to play gotcha. I don't know who I don't know who these people are.
Yeah.
Because
here's all the names you mentioned.
Give me a second. For example, G.A. Wells, big proponent. He wasn't even a New Testament scholar,
right? And he's not my favorite.
And he's not even a guy who does this anymore.
Well, Robert Price, he's gone back and forth. G.A. Wells has gone back and forth. He doesn't even consider himself a mythicist. He just put out the idea that this theory deserves more respect.
It sounds like you're trying to say, like, if people bring this up that something happens. My contention is most of these folks aren't even in a position of teaching authority to even lose a position.
Yeah, absolutely not true.
So I disagree that this is what happens because you named a guy. I'd have to look into him. What I'm saying is this doesn't happen because no one that is a historian or a legitimate New Testament scholar, generally they don't even hold this story. They kind of dismiss it very contemptuously. So you're saying they lose their jobs.
And here's what I'm saying. And again, I'm not going to ask you to take it on faith. I'll document this.
So you're saying there's one guy
No, there's more than one. Read Hector Avalos' book, The End of Biblical Studies.
Yeah, which is, the whole book's a contradiction in terms. If the thesis is correct, the book's a waste of time.
Well, I think it's a brilliant book. I think it's a brilliant book.
We can't know any more about Jesus because we know this, and that makes us know we don't know this. So I'm going to write a book telling you about it to show that Jesus studies are over because we can't do anything. Well, you see how it's self-refuting, though?
Well, I do and I don't. I mean, he is a biblical scholar saying that his field has become a joke, and in that sense, it's self-refuting. But it's self-refuting because that's the problem, that's the dilemma that we have to address.
But for a guy to know that his field's become a joke, he would have to have information he's certain of to be able to level a critique.
Or a reasonable expectation that it's true. I mean, if he's wrong, people can address his facts and challenge him, and that's what we should be doing.
But I mean, I don't know. I just think it's precarious for and I know not all atheists have to be mythicists, but I think it's precarious for an atheist to like say, here's the motivation, here's why this theory's not accepted, or here's what will happen. When here's the thing, David.
Yeah.
All the Christ mythicists that I have ever heard of are atheists or agnostics. Now, you don't have to be one to be the other. I already know that.
Sure.
What I'm saying is,
but
why is it
think
there?
About that. Well, how could it be otherwise? How could you have a Christian who embraces Christ myth?
There's all kinds of people. But see, is the world made up of Christians and atheists?
Well, no, but religious studies programs are.
No, they're not.
Yeah, they are. They are.
I guess it just feels like
the entire field of...
It's just simply not true.
The entire field of historical Jesus studies has always been, in fact, all of religious
Let's name the big
studies.
names. Let's name the big names, like I mentioned on a program. I mentioned
even earlier than that, from the beginning,
the early German critics. These aren't like
I'm talking from the beginning of the university system itself, not just the 19th century, not just the Dutch radical critics. You know,
well, the university system,
the vast majority
in Europe began by Christians.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. This all came out of a Christian context.
Well, all modern scholarship did, though.
Not all modern scholarship. That's debatable because but certainly everything in biblical, everything that's biblical theological studies, that all served theological purposes before it ever served secular.
If that's the case, then how do you explain places like Tübingen, where the so-called German higher critics, where everything is deconstructionism? It's not serving anything. Right. It's not serving a church purpose.
When you say,
if you read Wellhausen, if you read any of these guys, it just you have like if someone doesn't know about historical Jesus scholarship and they hear you talk about it, I feel like they'd be sold an incomplete, partial story that's not actually the current state. Like they'll get an idea, it's a bunch of like pastors who happen to get degrees and now write books on Jesus. It's just
I'm not saying
not the case.
Well, I'm not saying that.
That's what it sounds like. And
but what I'm saying is
not true.
What I'm saying is
it's not made up of a bunch of.
When I say that that the majority of biblical scholars are Christians, I don't mean that as a slam. I don't mean it as an ad hominem. It's just that
I actually am saying I'm not entirely sure that is true, especially if you add up.
Well, I want to make that years. I want to make that extremely clear.
And when you say Christian, it's like kind of like what kind of Christian do you mean? Like, do you consider Elaine Pagels the same kind of Christian as like Dale Bach? If you understand
you take somebody like Elaine Pagels or Bart Ehrman, even those guys who are secular, completely secular now, they still came out of a religious context. Almost every...
came out of a religious context. So it's totally irrelevant.
No, it's not.
It's not. It's a genetic fallacy.
It's not. And all I'm trying to say when I say that is that it's unreasonable to expect this theory to be accepted by the vast majority of biblical scholars. That's all I'm saying. Regardless of whether it's true or false.
Right. Regardless of whether it's true or false. That's why I won't get a fair hearing, and that's
that's why I think it hasn't. But I think gradually that's changing.
But and I understand. I know you don't. You would say no, it's of a different caliber. But just understand, like when a person has sort of a classical conspiracy theory. And remember...
And this is not a conspiracy theory.
Some conspiracy theories are true.
This is not a conspiracy theory.
Well, that's where we disagree. Yeah. Some conspiracy theories are true. Like, sometimes it's a real conspiracy theory, and it comes later that they eventually... But there's a lot of conspiracy theories that I think we can know for certain.
There's a lot more conspiracy theories than there are conspiracies.
Right. Yeah. So that's definitely true. So here's the thing, though. They always have a way to explain why what they believe is not taken seriously, and it usually has to do with the motivational intentions of the people in the power structure. So I'm just saying, to my ears, it seems like you're just saying, and here's why mine isn't taken seriously, just like JFK or moon landing or whatever it is.
And honestly, it gives me no pleasure to be on the outside of the consensus on this, for atheists or for Christians, because it doesn't really bother me when Christians hate my book, because what else are they going to say?
Hate your book?
Or when they disagree violently with the thesis.
Violently?
But and you don't, and that's why I love you. But there's atheists out there who do disagree violently with it, who would say, you might as well be denying the Holocaust, you might as well be doing creationism, and that bugs the crap out of me. And so this is a subject that I'm very sensitive about, because I don't do this for the money. I don't do this because I'm got an atheist agenda that needs that Christ to have been a myth. I do it because when I looked into history, and I'm certainly not the only ones that did this. There's like 3 ideas in that book that were mine, and all the rest came from across the theological spectrum.
Right.
When I look at the evidence, for me, it doesn't add up, and all the evidence points in a different direction. And that crazy masochism of trying to follow what I think is really happened is what drives me. And it's not always a happy place to be, but it's kind of awesome too. So.
Well, that sounds like that was our first part. Thank you. That was a good way to do it. I guess so. That first section is